Hi everybody, just wanted to provide a quick video that maybe sheds a little bit of light on the assignment that I'm asking you to do, the first kind of writing assignment, the written paper. I do want to say that there's not really necessarily a word minimum or maximum, but I think you saw in the assignment instructions, I'm hoping for a substantive paragraph for each one of those four prompts. So I'm going to describe a little bit about what it could be like to kind of think through how you would respond to the prompts on this paper. So I'll provide a little bit of an example from my own life, and just as an illustration for what you one of some of the lines of thinking that you could go through, right? So first, we notice a moral possible violation or a misuse of one's own information. Now, one student did ask me or did mention that the student wasn't totally sure whether the student had experienced a misuse of that student's own information. And in a sense, what we could do is you feel it as if you feel you haven't experienced a general misuse of your information. Uh, then I would be okay with you deciding just to describe a time when your information was simply used, even if it wasn't misused. And then for the remainder of your paper, what you could do, sorry, my hair's a little funky. For the remainder of your paper, what you could do is you can describe why you think that the company or the person's use of your information was morally justified, right? You don't necessarily have to talk about a misuse of information. Although, yes, that's what technically the paper is about. But you could just you could describe a justified use of information. Now, one of the reasons why I'm willing to kind of broaden it to that category is because even still, if you write such a paper, you'll still use some of the key terms from the text. You'll still be kind of practicing doing digital ethics. And that's really what this paper is designed to get you to do, to practice doing ethics in a digital context, relating specifically to information. All right, so let me just kind of walk you through a possible, like if I were kind of writing this specific paper the way it's laid out, one thing you could do, like one thing I experienced recently is I started to receive things in the mail that were trying to kind of sell an additional kind of insurance on electrical wiring in the house, right? And it became very apparent that the company that was trying to sell this insurance was aware of the specific company from which I was getting my electricity, right? So, and they had information about, address, things like that. So, there's a part of me that feels as though this might be a misuse of information, right? So now for the first part of the paper, I would describe, yeah, what's the nature of the business or the person, but in this case, it's a business. So I would describe that it's an insurance company, and let me see, let's make sure that I go down the list of other things. Yeah, the role of the company, right? What is the type of the information? The type of information was address and a little bit of information about the nature of our account with the electrical company, right? And then how they acquired the information. Now that might be take a little bit of kind of nosing around. You might want to try to find out exactly how it is that a company like yours, if whatever example you're using, how they got the information. Some of you might be talking about, say, ads that pop up when you're using social media. Well, in some cases, it's fairly clear how they got that information. A lot of the time, we sort of give them that information, even through subtle things like Google searching, right? But then, how is that information misused, right? So it's interesting. We could talk about whether the Google is misusing information when well, we give them the information, but we're not expecting them to use it in that way, right? Or we never really, at least not explicitly consented, although you could say we implicitly consented, but we never explicitly, specifically said, Google, you can use my information to sell me things, right? We never quite said that. So we could talk about that as part of how did they misuse the information. Now it's okay if it turns out like maybe as you're writing this paper, maybe you come to realize, you know what, maybe this wasn't necessarily a misuse of information, or maybe you are reaffirmed that it is a misuse of information. Either way, you can change your mind in the middle of the paper and you can realize things completely fine. Again, what I'm really looking for is whether you're interacting with the material, whether you're interacting with some of the key terms from the text and the things that we've been kind of writing about in discussions and things we've been that you've been interacting with in the quizzes. Okay, so second task, determine and describe which moral theories or principles the misuse violated. Well, in a sense, the misuse that I'm describing, I think that there's a sense in which that it violates some deontological principles. Specifically, it might violate some Kantian principles. This company seems to be using my information, which relates to who I am as a consumer, right, or as an individual, and they're using it in a way that I would not that I've not consented to. Now, using that kind of Kantian reciprocity, Kant was always wondering whether we could universalize something, right? So if they believe that it's okay to use my information in that way, what they're doing is they're permitting me to use their information that way, right? Would they be okay if I used their information and then maybe sold it off to a third party who was going to then use it to sell them things? Would they be okay if I did that to them? Not so sure that they would be okay with that, right? So there's something about the the balance or the idea of an action constituting permission to do something that seems to be out of balance there. It seems to violate at least a Kantian principle, right? There, it seems to kind of violate my autonomy as a person and a consumer. Okay, another way of putting it. Now, there are any number of ways that you can go with this when you are addressing it, provided that you are using some of the vocabulary and terms and that you're using them, generally correctly. I definitely want to see that you do have kind of at least a preliminary understanding of what these terms refer to. Now, if you're not sure, feel free to revisit, and you can revisit it. I believe that they are still accessible. You can revisit the quizzes, kind of have a look at the responses and how you scored on them if you want a refresher on some of these terms that I'm asking you to use here. Now, again, not again, but for the first time, you don't have to go through every last moral theory and talk about that. You don't need to do that. Just to at least find one moral theory that relates to that or that helps explain why it was a violation. Okay, so section 3, state your position as a formal argument that follows the syllogistic structure described in chapter 3, right? So talk about the premises, right, and then the conclusion that follows. And I made a little video about this where I was kind of describing or I was writing things out and trying to illustrate, kind of the ins and outs, the basic idea behind a formal logical argument using Venn diagrams and so forth. So I thought that a way to write a formal argument related to my concern about the misuse of information would go something like this. I've got it written down. Private information given for a specific reason should be used only for that reason, unless consent from the private individual is granted for that another specific reason. So, and a firm that does otherwise, a firm that uses information for a reason other than the explicitly consented to reason, or implicitly consented to reason, is misusing that information, right? If I did not say, yes, you may use this information to sell me insurance or something, or to try to sell me insurance. So a company that does otherwise is misusing the information. Well, this company that I mentioned, right, this insurance company, did use private information for a reason other than its original purpose. And the electrical company that may have sold them that information, right, however they acquired it, used my information for a reason other than its stated purpose or its original, even implicit purpose. Okay, and then therefore, a conclusion, the company misused the private information. All the premises seem to line up to then produce or generate that conclusion. And it's a deductive argument, the kind that I just used, right? Now, you may very well use an inductive argument where you are kind of providing a bunch of different reasons and then saying probably, right? You're saying these things seem to suggest that somebody made a moral violation. They might not be certain. That's another possibility. And usually that'll be an inductive argument when when it's a matter of probability. Okay, so then I would write, check for identify the argument as stated. Is it deductive or inductive? I just described it as it's deductive. Is it a valid deductive argument, or is it and if it's valid, is it unsound? Is it invalid but fallacious? You'll need to refer back to some of the vocabulary from chapter 3 in order to properly do that. Checking for the logic in my argument, it seems like it is a valid, it's a valid structure by a structure called modus tollens, right? And it would be interesting to go into some detail about that. But is it sound? Right. Okay. Well, it's possible that the information could be considered. There could be some implicit consent that is legally tied to somebody giving somebody else information. I'm not sure that that's the case, but soundness checking for soundness means checking to see whether the premises actually are true, right? Validity checks for, whether, in case they're true, whether the conclusion actually follows. But soundness says, okay, well, are these premises actually factual, right? Okay, checks for that. All right, so, oh yeah, so if you do discover that there might be a kind of problem with your reasoning, then maybe write a modified version of and this can all be part of your paper. You could write the original version of your argument, and then write any difficulties or problems you found in the argument, and then write the fresh modified version of the argument. And that will certainly demonstrate that you're thinking critically, not just about the company or the individual that you're accusing of misusing your information. You're also thinking critically about your own process of reasoning through this. Okay, so I'd love to see that. One of the things that I tell students is that my gold standard for evaluating essays and writing and papers and so forth is whether I can see the cogs turning in your mind, whether I can see that you are thinking about these kinds of things, and of course using the key terms, right, using some key concepts from the text, yes, but also that you are really thinking about them. And there, I of course, accuracy is important. You need to make sure that you really do have a proper, legitimate understanding of the key terms, and clarity in your writing is important. But that you are thinking through it, right? That I see you're thinking. That's more important to me than most things, right? Okay. All right, number 4. So the fourth prompt: determine which professional ethical principles or codes of conduct were violated, right? So here I'm referring to the chapter where we had talked about professional codes of conduct, right? So, and there was a little bit of discussion about whistleblowing. There was some discussion about codes of ethics within certain professions, especially with special interest in software engineering, right? So the people who are writing largely the code that might, and not just codes of ethics, but actually like computer code as well, that may be producing this kind of algorithm that either uses properly or misuses people's information. Are there any kinds of professional ethical principles or codes that were violated? So, in a sense, one of the criteria for these codes, I thought, was a criteria for the public interest, right? So, one of the commitments that software engineers are supposed to make, and I've got it right here, so I'll go ahead and read it out. Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, is that software engineers shall act consistently with the public interest, right? So we could say that that's one of the standards, right? That is connected to what is in its drawn-out form the Software Engineering Code of Ethics and Professional Practice, right? The SECEPP, SECEP, right? Would be one way you could pronounce it. So perhaps the software engineers who may have been contributing to this insurance company's algorithm to determine who they were going to try to sell insurance to, they may not have necessarily been acting in the public interest. Now, of course, you could then make an argument that, well, actually, this is part of how our capitalistic system works. It's how buying and selling works. It's how salespeople find possible customers, right? We do these kinds of things all the time, and it's one of the things that makes the world go round, right? And that could serve to justify it because it improves the economy, which is in the public interest. So who knows? Perhaps it's not necessarily a violation of these moral codes. Anyway, but as you can see, it may be that you change your mind in the middle of a description or a paragraph as you are thinking through something, right? So um, again, the overarching narrative, what is paramount to this, is that I want to kind of see you in this process of thinking through some of these important issues that relate to digital ethics, right? Okay, I think I've spoken enough, taken up enough of your time. But I hope the assignment remains clear to you, and I hope that it's pretty straightforward what I'm asking you to do in this fairly brief paper. Please email me if you have any questions in the meantime. The paper is due by the beginning of next week, so you've got an ample amount of time to work it out. And yeah, and again, I'm totally available in case you have any questions or concerns. I'm just an email away. So my email is, you can find it in the syllabus and on D2L, but it's first name dot last name at ursuline.edu. Jacob.waldenmaier, WALDENMAIER at ursuline.edu. All right, look forward to any of your comments, concerns, or questions, and I hope that you enjoy writing this paper and that you enjoy thinking through what I hope to you are some very interesting topics and subjects and concerns. Right? Thanks, and well, see you virtually soon.